Today I'll be doing SMU. So first I'll talk a little bit about their head coach, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So head coach Rhett Lashley enters his third season as the head coach of SMU, and this is his only head coaching job that he's had. So his overall record at SMU is 18-9. So his first season there, they were 7-6, but then in his second season, which was last season, they made a big improvement to 11-3. So in recruiting, SMU this year in their first year in the Power Four recruited the 107th in the country, which was really bad, but it's kind of understandable because it's their first year in the Power Four, and when they do well in the Power Four, which I think will be this year, I think they'll have a pretty good year this year. Their recruiting it should go way up, and their head coach did win their conference that they were in last season. So now, starting on the offensive side of the roster at quarterback, they're in pretty good shape here. Preston Stone returns, who had a pretty good year last year. He played in 12 games and had 3,197 yards and 28 touchdown passes. His completion percentage wasn't great at 59.9%, but his average yards per throw was good at 9.3. And then at wide receiver, everybody is back from last season, but they didn't get a lot of production out of any of their wide receivers last season. Their best receiver is Jake Bailey, who had last season a 528 on 42 catches and averaged at 12.6 a catch, but he didn't have any touchdown catches last season. And then at running back, they're in good shape here. They returned all three running backs from last season, who were all pretty good. So they returned Jalen Knighton, who played in 12 games last season, and he had 745 on 138 carries and seven touchdowns, averaging 5.5 a carry, and had two games of over 100 rushing yards. And they've got L.J. Johnson, who played in 11 games and had 576 on 108 carries and four touchdowns, averaging 5.3 a carry. And he had three games of over 100 rushing yards. And they've got Kamar Wheaton, who played in 10 games and had 83 carries for 410 yards and five touchdowns, averaging 4.9 a carry. Uh, and on the offensive line, they only have two starters coming back, but those are good players. They've got guard Logan Parr and center Justin Osborne coming back, who were two of the best offensive linemen in the group of five last season. And they bring in four Power Four transfers on the offensive line, including tackle Savion Beard from Oklahoma, who was a four-star recruit and as a freshman last season started four games and played in nine games. And they bring in tackle Andrew Chambly from Arkansas, who was a four-star recruit and played in 12 games and started eight games last season and was one of the SEC's best offensive linemen. So they should be in pretty good shape on the offensive line, and their offense should be pretty good again. It was good last year, averaging 38.7 points per game. And on the defensive side, they were good here too last year. They only gave up on average 17.8 points per game. And on the defensive line, they've got one really good player coming back, Elijah Roberts, who was the best defensive lineman in the group of five last season. He had last season 37 tackles and 62 pressures total, and he had 10 sacks and two forced fumbles and two pass breakups. But they could use some help other than him on the defensive line. No one else is really proven there. And then at linebacker, they returned two good players here. They returned their top two tacklers, Colby Wilson, who had 80 tackles last season and a sack and five total pressures and a forced fumble and fumble recovery and an interception and a pass breakup. And they returned Ahmed Walker, who had 65 tackles and five pass breakups and a sack and a fumble recovery and two total pressures last season. And then at safety, they're really good. This will probably be one of the ACC's best safety units. They return three good safeties. They return Isaiah Nwakabi, or whatever his name is, who had last season 61 tackles and three pass breakups and four interceptions. Two of them went for touchdowns and a sack and three total pressures. And Jonathan McGill, who had last season at 55 tackles and nine pass breakups and a pick six. And they returned Ahmed Moses, who played in every game last year, but only started one game and still had 46 tackles and a sack and a pass breakup. And then at cornerback, they returned one of two starting corners, Cole or Cal Sanders, who's a pretty good player. He had last season 31 tackles and seven pass breakups and three forced fumbles and an interception. But the other starting cornerback spot is questionable. They'll be starting most likely a transfer there. But overall, their defense should be solid. And then on special teams, they look okay at kicker. Their kicker returns, who was solid last year, but they do lose their punter. So now moving on to the predictions. They start the year on the road at Nevada. This should be an easy win. Even though Nevada is a group of five team and SMU is coming from the group of five level, Nevada is a terrible team and SMU has a lot of Power Five players on their roster. And then they play a team called Houston Christian. This will be a blowout win, an FCS opponent. And then they play BYU on a Friday. BYU is not going to be any good this year. SMU's got a lot more talent, and they're playing at home, so I've got to go with them to get this win. But I wouldn't be surprised if this one ended up being pretty close. And then they take a week off and play TCU at home. So both teams are pretty similar in my opinion. At quarterback, I'd say they're pretty similar. I like TCU's wide receivers better, but I like SMU's running backs better, and probably their offensive line a little bit better. And then defensively, I think TCU has a little more talent than SMU does, but they're close enough that playing at home, I think that makes the difference. And I'm going with SMU to get a really close win over TCU. So then they play Florida State at home. So this one will probably be pretty close. But if you watch my Florida State video, you saw that I don't think they're going to be really good again. But you did see also that I think they're going to be pretty good. And I think they're good enough to beat SMU. Florida State, I think, has an advantage over SMU at the line of scrimmage in this game, especially on the defensive line. Florida State is going to have a really good play, I think, at the line of scrimmage this year. And SMU, I know, has one really good defensive lineman, but Florida State has a defensive lineman that's probably even better than him. and they've got several other defensive linemen that are also good that SMU doesn't have. And I think that'll be the difference in this game, the line of scrimmage. And Then they play on the road at Louisville. I think this will be another loss. So, like with Florida State, Louisville's play at the line of scrimmage, I think, is going to be the difference. They're better there than SMU, I think. And I don't really see SMU going on the road and winning this one because Louisville is a tough place to play. Now, I might have went with SMU if it was a home game, but Louisville's clearly the better team in my opinion. But if you're an SMU fan, before you get mad and click off, just finish watching it because I am high on SMU. So then they take a week off and play on the road at Stanford. They can go on the road and win this one. I think they'll win this one pretty easily. Stanford's horrible. They're a team that probably, if they were in the group of five, they might not even be in the top half of it. They're so bad. And then they play on the road at Duke. I had a hard time with this one because it's on the road, even though I think SMU's clearly a better team than Duke. It's not a huge difference. Uh, so Duke, I don't think is going to be terrible. I think they'll have a decent defense, but Duke, I think, is going to struggle at the line of scrimmage this year, and I think that'll be the difference. SMU will have a huge advantage over them at the line of scrimmage in this game, and they'll win a pretty close one. And then they play Pittsburgh, a horrible team. They should win this one fairly easily. Pitt's gonna struggle to win hardly anything this year. And then They play Boston College after getting a third week off because they're playing a week 0 game. But Boston College is more like Duke. So they're not terrible. They do have some strengths to their team, but they've got more weaknesses than strengths. And SMU, I can't pick against them in this game playing at home. I think it probably will wind up being pretty close, though. And Then they play on the road at Virginia, a horrible team. They're like Stanford and Pittsburgh. I don't see any reason why SMU should lose this one, unless they just have a bad game, which is possible. It happens to a lot of teams where they'll have a bad game and lose to a terrible team like this. And then they end the season against California. They're one of those bad but not horrible teams. Like they're not going to be as bad as a team like Vanderbilt, but they're going to be below average. So it could be pretty close. But playing at home, SMU is clearly also the better team. I have to go with SMU to get this win. My final prediction for SMU is 10-2 overall and at 7-2 in the conference. I think this is about their ceiling. I wouldn't be shocked if they won one of Florida State and Louisville, but if they do, I think they'll probably lose one of these games that I've got them winning. But I also think that it's possible that they could lose two or three of these that I've got them winning and also lose to both Florida State and Louisville and uh, have a kind of a disappointing season. Uh, but I think they'll at least have a solid season. I think they'll be in the top half of the ACC for sure in their first year. But that will be it with this video. And please subscribe and thanks for watching. And I'll be back soon.